The crystal spires of the Nexari Imperial Palace stretched toward the binary stars, their surfaces refracting light into cascading rainbows that danced across polished floors. Princess Zephyra Stellaris stood at the grand balcony overlooking the ceremonial courtyard, her crystalline skin catching the light like living gemstone. Her 4 arms moved in graceful patterns as she adjusted her ceremonial robes, each gesture radiating the elegant power that marked her as royalty among the Nexari people. Below in the courtyard, a parade of suitors displayed their wealth and strength. The Vorthek delegation performed ritual combat dances, their massive forms crushing practice dummies with bone-crushing force. The ethereal collective floated in their containment pods, their gaseous forms shifting through hypnotic patterns meant to demonstrate their psychic abilities. Each alien noble sought to prove their worthiness through displays of power, wealth, or political influence. "Your Imperial Highness," Chancellor Morvex approached with his characteristic shuffle, his scaled hide gleaming with nervous moisture. "Warlord Kreshta of the Vorthek Empire has increased his dowry offer substantially. The military alliance would secure our outer territories for generations." Zephyra's violet eyes flashed with barely contained frustration. "I am not a trade commodity to be bartered away for military protection, Chancellor. These warriors seek a trophy wife, not a partner." Her telepathic abilities allowed her to sense the true intentions of each suitor. Behind their flowery words lay hunger for power, desire for political advantage, or simple lust for conquest. None sought her heart, only her crown and the strategic benefits marriage would bring to their own empires. "Your Highness must consider the stability of the realm," Morvex persisted, his voice taking on a wheedling tone. "The Emperor expects a decision soon. These alliances could prevent the border conflicts that have plagued us for decades." Zephyra turned away from the Chancellor's protests, her attention drawn to a figure seated apart from the main gathering. Unlike the other suitors who wore elaborate armor or flowing diplomatic robes, this one dressed in simple earth-toned clothing that spoke of practical function over ceremony. He appeared human, a relatively new species in galactic politics, with weather-bronzed skin and calloused hands that suggested honest work rather than pampered nobility. "Who is that?" she asked, gesturing toward the solitary figure. Morvex followed her gaze, and his expression soured. "That is Devon Blackwater, Your Highness, a human merchant who deals in rare artifacts and curiosities. I confess I am uncertain why he was included in the diplomatic roster. Some clerical error, no doubt." Zephyra watched as Devon carefully examined a small crystalline sculpture he had produced from his travel pack. His movements were gentle, reverent even, as he studied the artifact's prismatic structure. There was something peaceful about him that stood in stark contrast to the political maneuvering surrounding them. While other suitors postured and boasted, he seemed content to appreciate the beauty of the small treasure in his hands. "Arrange a private meeting," she said suddenly. "Your Highness, surely you cannot be serious. A human merchant? The scandal alone would destabilize the court. He possesses no military strength, no vast wealth, no political connections that could benefit the Empire." Zephyra's voice carried the musical quality of her people, but with an edge that could cut crystal. "My decision is final, Chancellor. I will meet with him in the meditation gardens within the hour." The meditation gardens represented one of the palace's most sacred spaces, where flowing water and carefully cultivated plants from across the galaxy created an atmosphere of tranquility. Ancient Nexari philosophers had designed the space to promote reflection and inner peace, far from the political intrigues of court life. When Devon arrived, he moved with a quiet confidence that impressed her. Unlike other petitioners who performed elaborate genuflections and spoke in flowery diplomatic language, he simply bowed respectfully and waited for her to speak first. "Master Blackwater," she said, settling gracefully onto a bench beside a fountain whose waters sang in harmonious tones. "I confess curiosity about what brings a human merchant to the imperial court." Devon's smile transformed his weathered features, and something in her chest fluttered with unexpected warmth. "Honestly, Your Highness, I think the Trade Consortium believed it would be good for diplomatic relations. They probably wanted to demonstrate human commitment to peaceful commerce rather than the military expansion some of our species are known for." His honesty refreshed her after days of carefully constructed political speeches. "And what sort of artifacts do you trade?" "Items with history and beauty," he said, his brown eyes lighting up with genuine passion. "Ancient sculptures, musical instruments from dead civilizations, star charts drawn by explorers who mapped unknown regions. I seek objects that carry stories, pieces that connect us to the vast tapestry of galactic culture." Zephyra found herself leaning closer, genuinely intrigued. Most conversations with potential suitors focused on military might, trade routes, or resource extraction. "You speak of them as if they were living things." "In a way they are," Devon replied, producing the crystalline sculpture she had seen him studying earlier. This piece was carved by ethereal artists 3,000 years ago. Every facet captures light differently, creating patterns that tell the story of their homeworld's binary sunrise. When I hold it, I can almost feel the wonder of the artist who spent decades perfecting each cut. She accepted the sculpture with reverent hands, immediately sensing the psychic resonance within the crystal. Her telepathic abilities allowed her to perceive the emotional echoes trapped within the artifact, wonder, dedication, love for beauty that transcended species barriers. The intensity of the artistic passion embedded in the piece brought tears to her eyes. "How did you know I could sense this?" she whispered. "I hoped you might," he said softly. "Beauty should be shared, especially with those who can truly appreciate it. Most collectors see only monetary value, but you understand the heart of what makes something precious." They talked for hours as the twin suns moved across the sky. Devon spoke of ancient civilizations and lost cultures with the passion of a scholar, while Zephyra shared her dreams of uniting the galaxy through cultural exchange rather than military conquest. She discovered that beneath his humble merchant exterior lay a brilliant mind that grasped complex philosophical concepts and possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of galactic history. When their conversation turned to personal matters, Devon revealed his loneliness as one of the few humans involved in deep space cultural exchange. "Most of my species are explorers or warriors," he explained. "They don't understand why I spend years tracking down a single artifact or why I find more value in a fragment of ancient poetry than in mineral rights to entire star systems. I understand that loneliness," Zephyra admitted, her 4 hands unconsciously reaching toward him in a gesture of comfort. "To be surrounded by people, yet feel utterly alone because no one shares your dreams or values." Their fingers intertwined, human and alien hands finding perfect harmony despite their different physiologies. the telepathic connection that formed between them was gentle, warm, and filled with the kind of recognition that comes when two souls discover they are not alone in the universe. "Devon," she said as the evening stars began to appear, "would you consider? That is, if circumstances were different, might you be interested in a partnership that went beyond trade agreements?" His eyes widened with surprise and something deeper, hope mixed with disbelief. "Your Highness, I would be honored beyond measure. But surely someone of your station requires a partner who can offer military protection, vast wealth, or powerful political connections. I'm just a wandering merchant with a passion for beautiful things." "Perhaps," she said, rising and moving closer to him, "I need someone who sees beauty in the universe rather than just opportunities for conquest. Someone who values art and culture over weapons and territory. Someone who makes me feel like a person rather than a political symbol." The kiss they shared was tentative at first, a gentle exploration of differences that somehow created perfect harmony. His lips were warm and soft against hers, and when she deepened the connection, he responded with a passion that sent fire through her crystalline veins. Her 4 arms encircled him, pulling him closer as their bodies learned to move together, despite their different anatomies. "Your Highness," he whispered against her lips, "are you certain?" "The scandal, the political consequences." "Let them talk," she breathed, her hands exploring the strong muscles of his shoulders and chest. "I choose you, Devon Blackwater. Not for what you can give the Empire, but for what you give me, hope, wonder, and the feeling that I am cherished for who I am rather than what I represent." When she announced her decision the following morning, the court erupted in chaos exactly as Morvex had predicted. Alien nobles muttered about the princess's sanity while political advisors calculated the diplomatic damage. The Vorthak delegation stormed out in fury, their warlord Captain Thane Grimjaw swearing vengeance for the perceived insult to his honor. But as Zephyra watched Devon accept the ceremonial consort crown with quiet dignity, she felt a peace she had never experienced. The gentle human who spoke of beauty and wonder had awakened something in her heart that no amount of political advantage could match. The wedding ceremony 3 days later was attended by beings from across the galaxy, all there to witness the scandal of a princess choosing love over politics. As they performed the ancient Nexari binding ritual, Zephyra placing her 4 hands over Devon's 2 while speaking vows of eternal partnership, she caught something in his eyes, a depth that seemed to hold secrets, a strength that went beyond. His gentle demeanor but in that moment, surrounded by political turmoil and whispered protests, she chose to see only the man who had shown her that beauty and wonder still existed in a galaxy too often consumed by war and conquest. She had no idea that her merchant husband carried secrets that would shake the very foundations of known space, or that his gentle hands had once wielded weapons that could reshape the balance of power between star empires. As they sealed their union with a kiss that sent crystalline chimes ringing through the ceremonial hall, Zephyra Stellaris believed she had married the most peaceful man in the galaxy. The truth would prove far more dangerous and magnificent than she could ever imagine. 3 months had passed since the wedding that scandalized the galaxy, and the crystalline towers of the Nexori Palace had become a sanctuary of unexpected happiness. Princess Zephyra Stellaris Blackwater now moved through the halls with a grace that spoke of contentment rather than duty, her 4 arms often reaching unconsciously toward her human husband as they walked together, through their shared domain. The morning light filtered through their private chambers, casting rainbow patterns across the silken sheets where Zephyra lay watching Devon sleep. His weathered features were peaceful in rest, and she marveled at how different he looked without the careful control he maintained during public appearances. In sleep, she could see hints of something harder beneath his gentle merchant facade. A tension in his jaw, scars on his shoulders that told stories he had never shared. "You're watching me again," Devon murmured without opening his eyes, a smile playing at his lips. "Guilty," she admitted, her crystalline skin warming with affection as she traced patterns on his chest with delicate fingertips. "I still cannot believe you chose me over a life of peaceful wandering among the stars." Devon's eyes opened, revealing depths that sometimes seemed to hold entire galaxies. "How could I choose anything else when you gave me something I never expected to find? And what is that?" she whispered, moving closer until their bodies pressed together beneath the sheets. "Home," he said simply, capturing one of her hands and kissing her palm. "You made me realize that all my wandering was just searching for a place where I belonged." Their morning intimacy had become a cherished ritual, a time when the weight of royal duties could not intrude upon their private world. Zephyra's 4 arms allowed her to worship his body with an intensity that left him breathless, while his human hands discovered ways to bring her pleasure that made her crystalline skin glow with inner fire. "Devon," she gasped as he traced patterns along her throat with lips that knew exactly how to make her tremble. "The council meeting." "Can wait," he murmured against her skin, his voice rough with desire. "Let them discuss trade agreements and border disputes. Right now, the only territory I care about is this bed and the woman in it." His words sent heat through her veins as she pulled him closer, their bodies moving together in the dance they had perfected over months of shared passion. When he entered her, it was with the reverence of a man who still could not believe his fortune, and when she cried out his name, it was with the voice of a woman who had found her other half among the stars. Later, as they lay entwined in the king and the teed, aftermath of their lovemaking, Zephyra studied his face with the analytical mind that made her such an effective ruler. "Devon, may I ask you something that has been troubling me?" "Anything," he said, though she noticed a subtle tension enter his posture. "Yesterday, during the security briefing about border incidents, you made several observations about tactical positioning and supply line vulnerabilities. Your insights were remarkably sophisticated for a merchant who trades in artifacts." Devon's hand stilled where it had been stroking her crystalline skin. "I've traveled through many war zones in my search for rare items. You pick up certain knowledge when your survival depends on understanding how conflicts develop." It was a reasonable explanation, but Zephyra's telepathic abilities detected something beneath his words, not deception exactly, but careful omission. She decided not to press the matter, though her curiosity continued to grow. The afternoon brought its usual parade of royal duties, but Zephyra found herself looking forward to the evening's entertainment with unusual anticipation. A delegation of warrior poets from the distant Asharan Republic was scheduled to perform traditional combat dances, and she was curious to see Devon's reaction to the display. The performance took place in the palace's grand amphitheater, where beings from across the galaxy gathered to witness the Asharan warriors weave deadly blade work into artistic expression. Each movement flowed like water, transforming lethal techniques into mesmerizing poetry of motion. Zephyra watched Devon's face as the warriors performed, noting how his eyes tracked every movement with an intensity that seemed almost professional. When the lead dancer executed a particularly complex sequence involving multiple blade transitions, she saw Devon's fingers twitch slightly, as though his hands remembered similar motions. "Beautiful work," Devon commented as the performance concluded. The third dancer's footwork showed influences from both classical, Vorthak battle forms and the flowing styles of the ethereal collective, a fascinating synthesis. Zephyra stared at him in surprise. "How do you know so much about different fighting styles?" "Academic interest," he replied smoothly. "Many of the artifacts I seek were created by warrior cultures. Understanding their combat philosophies helps me appreciate the context of their artistic expressions." Again, a perfectly reasonable explanation that somehow felt incomplete. That evening, as they prepared for bed, Zephyra decided to test her growing suspicions. "Devon, I've been thinking about expanding the palace security protocols. With all the political tension following our marriage, perhaps we should consider additional defensive measures." "What did you have in mind?" he asked, and she noticed how his posture shifted subtly, becoming more alert. "I was thinking about establishing overlapping patrol routes with designated fallback positions," she said, watching his reaction carefully. "Creating redundant communication networks and identifying potential choke points where defenders could channel attackers into kill zones." Devon nodded thoughtfully. "Sound strategy." "You'd also want to consider counterintelligence operations to identify potential infiltrators among the staff. Establish secure evacuation routes for essential personnel, and maintain rapid response teams positioned at strategic intervals throughout the complex." The words flowed from him with the fluency of someone who had planned similar defenses countless times before. Zephyra felt her breath catch as the implications sank in. "Devon," she said softly, "those are not the observations of a merchant with casual military knowledge." For a long moment, they stared at each other across their chamber. Zephyra could sense the war taking place behind his eyes, the struggle between honesty and self-preservation, between love and the habits of secrecy that had kept him alive. "Zephyra," he said finally, his voice heavy with something that might have been regret. "Everyone has aspects of their past they prefer not to discuss. The galaxy is full of violence, and sometimes good people are forced to make hard choices to survive." She moved closer to him, her forearms reaching out to frame his face with gentle hands. "I am not asking you to bear every secret, Devon, but I sense that you carry burdens you have never shared. As your wife, I want you to know that whatever you were before you came to me, I trust that your heart is true." The kiss he gave her then was desperate, filled with gratitude and guilt in guilt. Equal measure. As they made love that night, there was an intensity to their passion that spoke of unspoken fears and desperate need. Devon worshipped her body with hands that trembled slightly, as though memorizing every curve and texture against some uncertain future. The next morning brought news that would test both their growing bond and Devon's carefully maintained cover. High Inquisitor Veltar of the Sacred Order arrived at the palace, ostensibly for a routine spiritual consultation, but actually conducting a discreet investigation into the princess's controversial marriage. "Your Imperial Highness," Veltar intoned as he was presented at court. his ancient features carved from living stone and his eyes burning with fanatic intensity. The Sacred Order wishes to ensure that your union brings blessing rather than curse upon the Nexari people. Zephyra maintained her diplomatic composure despite the obvious threat in his words. Of course, High Inquisitor. My husband and I welcome any spiritual guidance you might offer. Veltar's gaze shifted to Devon, and Zephyra felt her husband's subtle shift into the relaxed posture of a harmless merchant. Master Blackwater, I confess curiosity about your spiritual practices. Humans are known for their diverse religious traditions. I find wisdom in many philosophies, Your Holiness. Devon replied with perfect humility. The universe is vast enough to contain multiple paths to truth. Indeed, Veltar mused, his stone features revealing nothing. And what of your previous travels? I understand you have visited many worlds in your merchant ventures. As the interrogation continued under the guise of polite conversation, Zephyra noticed how Devon's answers were always truthful but carefully incomplete. He spoke of visiting distant worlds and encountering various cultures, but never provided specific details that could be verified or contradicted. The real test came during the evening banquet, when Veltar casually mentioned recent pirate attacks on merchant vessels in the outer systems. Such dangerous times for honest traders, he observed. I suppose you have encountered such threats in your travels, Master Blackwater? Occasionally, Devon admitted. Pirates tend to avoid ships that carry little of obvious value. Ancient artifacts are precious to collectors, but worthless to brigands seeking quick profit. Wise strategy, Veltar agreed. Though I confess surprise that you have avoided all conflict. The shipping records show several incidents in systems you have visited. Most notably, there was a remarkable occurrence near the Kronos Station 3 years ago, where an entire pirate fleet was somehow defeated by what witnesses described as a single human warrior of extraordinary skill. Zephyra felt Devon's tension like a physical presence, though his expression remained perfectly calm. The galaxy is full of remarkable stories, Your Holiness, though I suspect many grow in the telling. No doubt, Veltar smiled, but his stone eyes remained cold. Still, it is curious how often tales of exceptional human warriors seem to emerge from regions you have visited, almost as though you travel in the wake of legends. That night, as they lay in their bed, Zephyra could feel the weight of unspoken truths pressing between them like a physical barrier. Devon's body was tense beside her, and she knew that sleep would elude him as darker memories surfaced. Devon, she whispered in the darkness, whatever secrets you carry, whatever you fear I might discover about your past, know that my love for you is not conditional upon your being the simple merchant you pretend to be. He turned to face her, and in the dim light filtering through their windows, she could see something almost like desperation in his eyes. Some truths are more dangerous than others, Zephyra. Some secrets exist not to protect the one who keeps them, but to protect those they love. And some secrets, she replied, pulling him into her arms with all four limbs, grow more dangerous the longer they remain hidden. As dawn approached, neither of them slept, both lost in thoughts of what revelations the coming days might bring, and whether their love would survive the truth that seemed determined to surface despite all their careful defenses. The festival of twin stars was meant to be a celebration of unity, bringing together representatives from across the galaxy to honor the ancient traditions that bound civilizations together in peace. The palace's grand ballroom sparkled with crystalline decorations, and beings from dozens of worlds mingled in an atmosphere of diplomatic harmony. Princess Zephyra moved through the gathering with practiced grace, her ceremonial gown flowing like liquid starlight as she welcomed each delegation with appropriate honors. Devon stood beside her, perfectly comfortable in his role as royal consort despite the whispered doubts that still followed him through court circles. To observers, he appeared every inch the devoted husband, attentive to his wife's needs while maintaining the humble demeanor that had first attracted her attention. Only Zephyra could sense this subtle tension in his posture, the way his eyes continuously scanned the crowd with an alertness that seemed excessive for a simple merchant. "Your Highness," Ambassador Quillen of the Trade Federation approached with his characteristic oily smile. "Such a magnificent celebration. The unity displayed here tonight surely bodes well for continued peaceful relations throughout the sector." "Indeed, Ambassador," Zephyra replied diplomatically, though her telepathic abilities detected the falseness beneath his words. "The Nexari Empire has always valued cooperation over conquest." As the evening progressed, she noticed Devon's tension increasing. His responses to casual conversation became more clipped, and his merchant smile began to look strained around the edges. When she asked if he was feeling well, he assured her it was merely the strain of so many formal interactions. But something in his eyes suggested deeper concerns. The attack came without warning. The ballroom's crystal illumination system died, suddenly plunging the vast space into near-total darkness. For a heartbeat, there was only confused murmuring from the assembled dignitaries. Then the screaming started. Muzzle flashes erupted from multiple entry points as armed figures in dark combat armor poured into the hall. The distinctive whine of plasma weapons filled the air, followed by the wet sounds of bodies hitting polished floors. Through the chaos, Zephyra could see the systematic nature of the assault. This wasn't random violence, but a coordinated assassination attempt targeting specific individuals. "Your Highness." Chancellor Morvex appeared beside her, his scaled hide glistening with terror sweat. "We must reach the safe room immediately." A plasma bolt took him in the chest before he could finish speaking. Zephyra watched in horror as her father's oldest advisor collapsed, his body convulsing once before going still. Around the ballroom, she could see the methodical execution of diplomats and nobles, beings she had known since childhood cut down like grain before the harvest. "Well, well," a familiar voice echoed through the hall as emergency lighting finally activated. "Princess Zephyra, you've been remarkably difficult to isolate." Captain Thane Grimjaw of the Vorthek Empire stepped into view, no longer wearing his ceremonial diplomatic robes, but instead clad in full battle armor. The massive alien warrior's tusks gleamed with savage satisfaction as he gestured to his fellow conspirators securing the room. "Thane," Zephyr breathed, the betrayal hitting her like a physical blow. "Why?" "Because your little marriage experiment threatens everything we've built," he snarled, his voice carrying the bone-deep fury of wounded pride. The Vorthak Empire offered the Nexari a true alliance built on strength and shared conquest. Instead, you chose to mate with a weak human merchant, showing the galaxy that the proud Nexari have grown soft. Zephyra pressed herself against a marble pillar, her ceremonial gown torn and her heart hammering against her ribs. "You would murder innocents for political advancement?" "I would do whatever is necessary to restore proper order," Thane replied. raising his massive plasma rifle. "But first, I want to know where your precious merchant husband is hiding. I want him to watch as I demonstrate what happens when weaklings interfere with the affairs of warriors." Right behind you came a quiet voice that somehow carried clearly through the chaos-filled hall. Every head in the room turned toward the main entrance, where Devon stood silhouetted against the corridor's lighting. He appeared unarmed and still, wore his formal dinner attire, but something fundamental had changed about him. His posture, his bearing, the way he carried himself, the careful humility had vanished, replaced by something that made the armed assassins take involuntary steps backward. Thane laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "The dirt scratcher arrives. Come to watch your wife die, human?" "No," Devon said, moving with fluid grace toward an ornamental weapon display along the wall. "I came to take out the trash." He reached for what appeared to be a ceremonial sword, an ornate blade meant for decoration rather than combat. The moment his fingers closed around the hilt, the transformation was complete. The gentle merchant vanished entirely, and what remained was something that radiated lethality like heat from a forge. "Impossible," Thane breathed, but he was already bringing his plasma rifle to bear. When Devon moved, it was with the controlled violence of a predator that had turned killing into an art form. The decorative blade sang through the air, and despite its ornamental appearance, it found the weak points in armor with surgical precision. The first assassin barely had time to aim before Devon was inside his guard, the ancient sword opening his throat in a spray of alien blood. Zephyra watched in stunned fascination as her gentle husband became a force of nature. He flowed like water around incoming fire, the ceremonial blade weaving patterns of death that seemed almost too beautiful to be real. Each movement was economical, deadly, perfect, the work of someone who had spent lifetimes perfecting the art of war. "You're not just a merchant," she whispered, understanding flooding through her like ice water.
Devon spun through a group of 3 attackers. His blade worked so fast it appeared as silver lightning in the emergency lighting. Bodies fell around him like wheat before a scythe, and still he moved forward with inexorable purpose. "General Phantom." Thane snarled, recognition and fear warring in his massive features. "The Butcher of Kepler Station. The ghost of the Outer Rim. I should have known." The name hit Zephyra like a physical blow. General Phantom, the legendary human warrior whose very name was whispered in terror across the galaxy. The man who had single-handedly broken the siege of New Terra, who had carved through entire armies with nothing but blade and determination. The living legend who had vanished from known space 5 years ago, leaving behind a reputation written in the blood of his enemies. "You know who I am." Devon, no, General Phantom said quietly as he advanced on Thane with predatory grace. "Then you know how this ends." Thane raised his massive rifle, but the human was already moving. The plasma bolt seared through empty air as Devon rolled under the weapon's arc, coming up inside the vortex reach. The ceremonial blade found the gap between armor plates with mechanical precision, sliding between ribs to pierce the alien's primary heart. "This is impossible," Thane gasped, his massive form swaying as life ebbed from his eyes. "You were just a merchant." "I was tired of killing," Devon replied softly, supporting the dying alien as he collapsed. "She gave me a reason to. Try being something else." The remaining assassins fled when they realized they faced not a simple human, but the galaxy's most feared warrior. In the sudden silence that followed, Zephyra found herself alone with the man she thought she knew, surrounded by the bodies of those who had underestimated him. Devon, General Phantom, turned to face her, and she could see the war taking place behind his eyes. The gentle merchant she had fallen in love with was still there, but now she could also see the deadly warrior who had shaped the course of galactic history through sheer force of will and skill. "Zephyra," he said, his voice carrying all the weight of unspoken truths. "I can explain." She stood slowly, her forearms trembling as the full implications crashed over her. "Your General Phantom. The most feared warrior in known space. The man who conquered the hegemony single-handedly. The legend that parents used to frighten children into obedience." "I was," he admitted, setting down the bloodied blade with reverent care. "But that's not who I chose to become when I met you." "All this time," she whispered, "you've been lying to me. Living a false identity. Making me believe I had married a simple, peaceful man when in reality I'm a killer," he finished quietly. "Someone who has taken more lives than most people could count. Someone whose hands are stained with so much blood that I stopped believing I deserved happiness or peace." Tears flowed down her crystalline cheeks, each drop catching the emergency lighting like liquid diamonds. "How could you keep this from me? How could you let me believe?" "Because for the first time in my life, someone looked at me and saw something worth loving," he said, his own voice breaking. "When you chose the merchant over the warriors, when you saw beauty and gentleness in me instead of death and destruction, I wanted so desperately to be that man. To be worthy of the love you offered." She stared at him across the body-strewn ballroom, this man who had shown her tenderness and passion, who had whispered poetry while making love to her, who had revealed depths of compassion she never expected to find. Now she understood the shadows in his eyes, the careful control he maintained, the way he sometimes looked at her as though memorizing her face against some uncertain future. "The artifacts," she said suddenly. "The stories about ancient civilizations and lost cultures. Were any of them real?" "All of them," he replied immediately. "That part was never false, Zephyra. I really am fascinated by history and beauty. During the war years, collecting those pieces was the only thing that kept me sane, reminded me that there was still wonder and artistry in a galaxy consumed by violence." She could feel the truth of his words through their telepathic bond, but the revelation still left her reeling. "And when you spoke of loneliness, of searching for a place to belong?" "That was the most honest thing I've ever said to anyone," he whispered. "I was so tired, Zephyra. Tired of fighting. Tired of being a weapon pointed at whoever needed destroying. When I met you, when you offered me love and peace and a chance to be something other than a killer, it felt like salvation." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant sounds of palace security forces arriving to secure the scene. Zephyra studied his face, this man who was both the gentle merchant she had fallen in love with and the legendary warrior whose name struck fear into the hearts of his enemies. "Show me," she said finally. "What? Show me who you really are. Not the merchant's mask, not the killer's reputation, but the man who exists between those extremes. The one who collects beautiful things and whispers poetry in the darkness. The one who chose love over conquest." Devon, General Phantom, the man who was somehow both and neither, moved toward her with careful steps. When he reached out to touch her face, his hands trembled slightly, as though he feared she might disappear. "I love you," he said simply. "Everything else is just history and choices I can't unmake. But what I feel for you, what we've built together, that's the most real thing in my life." Zephyra leaned into his touch, her forearms reaching up to frame his face. "I married a merchant who turned out to be a warrior. But perhaps I needed both. Someone gentle enough to cherish my heart and strong enough to protect what we've built together." Their kiss was desperate and salt-sweet with tears. An affirmation of love that had survived the revelation of dangerous truths. When they broke apart, Zephyra could see that neither the merchant nor the warrior had been false. They were simply different facets of the same complex man who had chosen her above everything else the galaxy had to offer. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," he said, pulling her closer as security forces flooded the ballroom, "we decide together. The galaxy knows General Phantom lives again. Some will see that as a threat to be eliminated, others as a weapon to be recruited. But whatever comes, we face it as partners." "Partners," she agreed, and in her voice was the steel that had made her a princess worth following. "Let them come. They'll discover that the woman who chose a legend for love is no helpless prize to be won or discarded." As dawn broke over the crystal spires of the Nexari Palace, Princess Zephyra Stellaris Blackwater stood beside her husband on their private balcony, watching the twin suns paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. He was no longer her simple merchant, and she was no longer naive about the dangers their love would face. But they were still themselves, two souls who had found something precious in each other's arms, strong enough together to face whatever challenges the galaxy might throw against them. The blade had revealed the truth, but the truth had only made their bond stronger. In the distance, ships were already departing the palace, carrying news of the night's events to every corner of known space. Some would bring allies, others enemies. But all would discover that love, when combined with legendary skill and royal determination, was a force that could reshape the very stars themselves. Their story was far from over. It was just beginning.